So this is not something that I thought we would ever be talking about, but we had ourselves an article published on The Athletic from 2 weeks ago, 1.5 weeks ago. This is actually kind of old news, but it is an interesting enough idea that I wanted to go out there and explore in this video, because James Myrtle on November 13th went out there and asked, who will be the NHL's next offer sheet targets? Which teams are vulnerable? Now, here's the thing. It's on The Athletic, it's paid for material, this is not available to the general public. But if you do have The Athletic, I'll recommend you go out there and read this piece. It'll be linked in the description for your reading pleasure. And it does go out there and give us some ideas as to whom it is that could be offer sheeted. In fact, there is an entire list of a whole bunch of names that are tossed out there. Lower tier players, the bargain guys, as Myrtle goes out there and describes. There are some higher level targets, some rising stars, and then of course some top tier superstar players that could be offer sheeted. Essentially, the superstar players that Myrtle writes about. He says, yeah, there's no real reason for any of these guys to get offer sheeted, but there is a really interesting idea that I wanted to go over in regards to one of the teams that could be vulnerable and one of the players on that team. Enter Alexander Romanov. Now, I'm kind of bringing all this up out of nowhere. Where's this coming from? Well, Romanov was indeed included on the tier list of rising stars that could be eligible for an offer sheet. And alongside of Romanov, you also had yourselves Noah Dobson that was listed in the top tier superstars level of the article. But Myrtle does go out there and write in the piece that Noah Dobson is probably somebody that the Islanders will commit significant money to. Doesn't matter how they're going to do it, they're going to do it. Noah Dobson is here to stay. But he also writes towards the end of the piece that out of the teams that could be the most vulnerable to an offer sheet, the two New York teams, the Isles and the Rangers, are both among that crop. When you consider whom it is the team already has at their disposal, whom it is they're going to have to be paying, and what other situations are going to be there for the Islanders. There's Brock Nelson, there's Palmieri, there are some UFAs there, and other RFAs that are already going to be there too. So it's going to be tough for the Islanders to fully bring back everybody, and that's without the idea of an offer sheet. So if somebody really wanted to get under the Islanders' skin and try to pull everything out from inside, you could try to offer sheet Alexander Romanov, give him a dollar amount that would be in the Philip Broberg territory, for example, and try to pry him away for a second-round pick. Alexander Romanov is 24 years old, 6'1", 209, left-handed D. Obviously, it doesn't take a genius to acknowledge the reason why we're talking about this dude. Because he's a former Montreal Canadien and there was a lot of hype around Romanov, he's making $2.5 million a year this season. It expires at the end of the year, and he's got 2 points in 11 games played. Now, he's on pace for actually fewer points than the prior 2 seasons he has had. He had 2 22-point years with the Isles in 22-23, as well as 23-24. But you will note that part of the reason that Romanov was so successful and so useful, despite not producing too much, is because over the years he has been a minutes-eating, top-pairing beast. 23-minute games are the norm for Alexander Romanov, and if you go back into 2023, 2024, you'll see a few 30-minute games in there. And the crazy part is, some of these games were in regulation. I mean, that game against the Ottawa Senators, where Romanov was forced to play half the darn game, was always one that stands out to me, where I was like, okay, this guy is legit. He is really going out there and doing as much as he can. Of course, he kind of needed to, because some of the defense in that game got taken out, but still, I remember that game very particularly. It also put him on my radar in fantasy hockey, because Alexander Romanov was a shot-blocking machine and a physical beast. He really kind of came into his own over the past few years, ever since getting traded from the Montreal Canadiens. There's such an interesting profile here with this dude. He has had a few injury troubles this season as well, but he came back with a vengeance with a whole bunch of hits and a whole bunch of blocks. That's pretty par for the course, honestly, for Alexander Romanov. So ultimately, when you think about his value and his skill set, if you want a guy who can just play some solid defensive hockey, you don't have to worry about him. You don't have to go out there and expect much. You just have to expect good, calm, and efficient defensive play. Physical, too. Alexander Romanov could be a perfect offer sheet target, and in fact, if you wanted to get pushy about it, you could even say that he might even be worth more than the price that the St. Louis Blues paid to get Philip Broberg from the Oilers. Now, sure, you can talk about compensation prices and everything, and that will always change depending on the number, but if you're forced to cough up maybe even a first-round pick for Alexander Romanov, I don't necessarily think that's the worst thing in the world if you're a team that's looking to make a big push into the playoffs and trying to take control of your blue line and add on a guy like Romanov, who is still so young. He's only 24 years old, and he's already in a spot where he is a top minutes-eating defenseman. There's so much value in what that kind of a guy can bring, and I think Romanov is one of the best players that you could infer could get an offer sheet just because of that level of talent, and because New York might be committing so much money to Palmieri and Noah Dobson too. Don't even get me started on the idea of Noah Dobson getting offer sheeted. That guy's probably not going to. The Isles are going to give him as much money as he wants. He's going to be one of the top paid defensemen in the league because him, alongside of the other guys in that 2018 draft, the Quinn Hugheses, the Dahlins, and the Evan Bouchards, it's just kind of an elite defenseman class of their own, and there's really no other class that I think can match that in the past few years here. So because there's going to be some money committed and tied up into other guys, is Romanov the odd man out? And interestingly enough, I wanted to dive into the hypothetical idea as to whether or not the Canadiens could be the team to get that offer sheet in there. Obviously, I'm not, really serious about it, but I'm kind of thinking, Montreal's got a lot of guys on their blue line, and a few of those guys play in a very specific style of mold. You've got the Mayus, the Barons, the Hudsons, etc. These guys can play offensively. If you wanted to talk about all-around guys, David Reinbacher is there. If you want to talk about defensively minded guys, Cayden is there. Alexander Romanov is kind of more in that defensive-leaning type of mold, so if you really wanted to go all-out offensive, okay, let's do Hudson, Reinbacher. That's a nice offensive guy and a stabilizing two-way guy. If you do Gooley with Barron, for example, there you go. There is some defensive stability and some offense, and then you could do the same thing with a guy like Romanov and, I guess, Logan Mailloux? I don't know. There are already too many defensemen on the Montreal Canadiens, with Struble, with Xhekaj, with all the other guys we had not even discussed, so maybe it's not really a good idea for Montreal to get in this, but I did want to bring this idea up. Do you think it's possible that Alexander Romanov gets an offer sheet because his name was mentioned in the Athletic piece? I will leave a link in the description if you want to go ahead and read it yourself. Obviously, I'm not going to go out there and screenshot that article, but believe me, a lot of those ideas that we had talked about are from that piece, so it's all going to be there in the description. But for now, if you're an Islanders fan, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. On a scale of 1 to 10, how scared are you about the idea of one of your guys getting offer sheeted? I would imagine that Noah Dobson, there's probably no fear there because you know that you're going to re-sign him to a considerable dollar amount. But what about Alexander Romanov, his D partner, and a guy who plays some very important hockey for your club? Is it possible that he gets offer sheeted? Is it possible that he gets Philip Broberged? That was such a weird verb. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99 and bye.